The danger is not over.
You get to do it for real. Go out the airlock, into the payload bay. I've been doing a lot of flying. Looked over, that's the one gauge you have on the MMU. It's a little fuel gauge, and both the needles were in the yellow.
Low on fuel, Nelson had to give up. The satellite was ultimately repaired inside the shuttle's cargo bay, but the MMU had proved its potential.
Insulation surrounding the tank caught fire, and fed by the oxygen, it was like a blowtorch in the bay of the service module until the pressure increased to the point where it blew the side of the spacecraft off.
And we had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning there.
At that time, though, looking out the window, I could see debris all around us.
Yeah, that's because of AC. And it looks to me, looking out the hatch, that we are venting something.
And Jim Lovell called down from the spacecraft, "Hey, I'm looking out the window, and I see I'm venting something." Then it sunk in. And this is this very stark, lonely feeling that you get when you recognize that now we're in a survival situation. It's going to be damn tough, maybe even impossible to get this crew home.
The world suddenly took notice.
At the moment, the astronauts are continuing to try to isolate their trouble. A late report says the spacecraft now is operating on battery power alone. All unnecessary equipment is being turned off.
I hate to put it that way, but I've got a feeling we've lost 2 fuel cells.
We had 3 major parts of the spacecraft that were all attached to each other. We had the command module, which has a very limited electrical power lifetime, but it has the only heat shield. This is the crew's reentry vehicle. That's what they come back to Earth in. Attached to this command module was the service module where the damage, the explosion had occurred. It was basically useless, but it was protecting the space heat shield from the sun's rays and from the environment of space. On the other end of the spacecraft, you had the lunar module, which was our lifeboat.
I want you to get some guys figuring out minimum power in the LEM to sustain life.
We needed to get it up and running very quickly. We had this, as I viewed out the window, this sea of debris. So we needed to get it up and running before the command module died.
The pressure in O2 tank 1 is all the way down to 2.
Once Hayes had shut down the command module, the lunar module, or LEM, would have to provide all the crew's power and life support. As part of the mission's backup crew, it was up to Charlie Duke to figure out how to get Apollo 13 home.
John Young and I were mostly in the simulator figuring out the power-up sequence and then the power-down sequence, and to practice the burns that would get us back on what was called a free return trajectory. That was what Lovell and Hayes had to do.
400,000 kilometers still separated the crew of Apollo 13 from the rest of humanity. They were still hurtling towards the moon, and one crucial decision needed to be made, and quickly.
We're entering the lunar sphere of influence. And for a short period of time, we have an opportunity to come around in front of the moon, but to do this, we would have to use our main engine, and we would have to jettison the lunar module. And the lunar module, by this time, was our lifeboat. So the only other option was to go around the moon, and this was a difference of almost 4 days in the trip.
All Fred Hayes could do was watch and wait as the crippled ship swung around the moon.
If we had not executed some maneuver, either to make a direct return or go around the moon, we'd still be in orbit today.
3.5 days into the stricken flight, and with the command module shut down, the crew executed a vital engine burn to push them homeward. But conditions were worsening. For the astronauts huddled inside the cramped lunar module, the temperature was dropping sharply. Fatigue was setting in. And, most alarming of all, their life support system was beginning to fail.
Because I didn't get any sleep last night at all.
The crew was gradually suffocating. We used a chemical scrubber to remove the carbon dioxide as the crew breathes. But this chemical scrubber had now been saturated with carbon dioxide. It was no longer doing its job.
We did not have an adequate supply in the lunar module, even for 2 people, much less 3.
There were only 10 critical hours to solve the problem. Working with materials and parts they knew the astronauts could find around the spacecraft, the ground crew invented an ingenious solution.
We knew that we had an oxygen canister. It was square, that was capable of doing the job, but what we had to do is we had to adapt it. So we started building this adapter made out of a piece of cardboard from the flight plan. We used a plastic bag like a baggie. We used duct tape, this wide tape that you use to hold it all together. We needed a filter, so we used a sock as a filter and started cleaning the air once again.
The crew now needed to execute one final task to get them home. With their computers dead, Hayes and Lovell had to maneuver the spacecraft for their final approach by line of sight alone.
So we had 2 people steering the spacecraft, executing a maneuver that they had never even conceived, never done in training, and they did this thing perfectly.
We're at burn attitude, flight.
I'll let
Ignition. Thrust looks good. Shut down.
hang in there, I won't be long.
I was happy to reach that point where we're going to be able to get through the end of this thing.
The entire world held its breath. The astronauts were now almost home. But first, they had to abandon the lunar module and bring the dormant capsule back to life.
This was, I'd say, the moment of disbelief, because the powered up the systems, turned the telemetry on, and the controllers looked and everything was working. The spacecraft was never designed, it was never intended to be turned down. And literally the system's frozen, and now the system, they came up and they're doing the job. You get a bullish, cocky feeling when you sense victory. And a few hours after we had powered the spacecraft up, the young people, you could feel it in this room. And they knew they were going to win, they just had to be smart for the next 3 or 4 hours.
When the capsule undocked from the crippled command module, the crew finally saw the full extent of the near-fatal explosion.
The whole panel is blown out, almost from the base to the engine. It's really a mess. Man, that's unbelievable.
The closer we got to re-entry, the more optimistic I became. I knew that everything was going to last long enough as far as the oxygen and electrical power, and if we didn't foul this thing up, either in mission control or on board, we got it made.
Okay, LOS in a minute or a minute and a half. At entry attitude, we'd like Omni Charlie. And welcome home. Thank you.
The entire world is now listening. Everything that is happening in mission control is being reported live, and you have this relationship that has developed between the crew and the ground during this very difficult time. And it's real hard to describe your emotions to each other. And finally, the rookie on board the spacecraft, Jack Swigert, comes down and he says,
Hey, I want to say you guys are doing real good work. So are you guys, Jack.
and then about 20 seconds later, we go into blackout.
A prayer for the crewmen of the Apollo 13. We'll hold silence for a moment, please.
My communicator at this time was Joe Kerwin. I say, okay, Joe, give him a call.
Odyssey Houston standing by, over.
And all you hear is static. You don't hear anything from the crew. And then you call again.
Odyssey Houston standing by for your noun 67 when you get it, over.
And we're now moving to the second minute. Almost our calls are becoming, please, you please answer us.
Okay, Joe, over.
Okay, we read you, Jack.
When we could look and see the blossoming of 3 main chutes, we knew, and at that point at least, we were going to make it.
Can we get 50 strokes? Roger that.
And no person in their entire life that was in this room that day will ever forget that instant. I literally cried, and I think many of the controllers. The intensity, the emotional release was so great that there was no way to keep it to yourself.
Odyssey Emergency Houston, we show you on the mains. It really looks great.
Well, it was kind of like,
Under Apollo 13, this is recovery, and your chutes look good.
If you ever prayed in your life or you ever thanked God or whatever it is, this was the instant of it. It was a hell of a good day.
It's on station. Photo 1's on station. Photo 1 observes flight down at this time. On pickup, there it is. Roger.
It was a monumental task, but we pulled it off successfully, and so that gave me great confidence in the whole Apollo team, the competence of all of those guys and gals in there. And I knew when I got my chance to go, that whole team would be supporting me also. So